Finally, after so much research, I have a list that I'm happy about. If you read the title, you know what this video is about, so let's just jump into it. Because we have a lot to cover. First, let's start with the criteria. The main criteria for these videos are obviously longevity, efficiency, effectiveness, military and economic success, all that good stuff, with some bonuses rulers can acquire. For example, if they founded the state, brought it back to life, or if the state reaches peak during their rule. I'll try my best to remove my European bias and include all rulers that actually deserve it. So expect to see a lot of rulers you have never even heard of. Also, I will use Google Translate's pronunciation for some ruler names that I don't want to butcher, so keep that in mind. So, the 1st century. You knew that Roman emperors are going to have a huge part in a list like this. And the first one is Caligula, no I'm joking. It's Domitian. He reigned for 15 years, and while that's not as long as most of the other rulers on this list, he used that time greatly. He solved the inflation problem by revaluing the Roman coinage, and he also sought to restore the damaged city of Rome. His laws maintained historically low corruption among all of the Roman officials. As far as military campaigns go, he failed to defeat the Dacians, he beat the Chatti, and finished the conquest of Britain, although most, if not all the work in Britain was done by his general Agricola. His most famous military contribution was the development of the Limes Germanicus, which encompassed a vast network of roads, forts, and watchtowers constructed along the Rhine River to defend the empire. Domitian openly rendered the power of the Senate, which ultimately led to his demise. Honorable mentions for the 1st century is Kujula Katpishes, who founded the Kushan Empire, and Guangwu of Han, the emperor of the Han dynasty. Now the 2nd century is tough. You have Trajan, Marcus Aurelius, Hadrian, but I went with Marcus Aurelius. He ruled for 19 years and his reign was marked by numerous military crises, and literally all the major frontiers being threatened by invasion. He repelled the German one and successfully fought off the Parthians. Aurelius also, interestingly enough, permitted free speech, which made it possible for comedy writer Marullus to make fun of him and not face any kind of retribution. It is also important to say that he co-ruled with Lucius Verus, so he didn't do it all by himself. Oh, and Commodus as well, yes, that Commodus. Also, Marcus Aurelius is probably the most famous philosopher of Stoicism, writing Meditations, a book whose quotes you see on all corners of the internet. He is said to be one of the most skilled emperors as far as laws go as well. Yeah, he was pretty good. And let me not forget about Canisius I, under whose rule the Kushan Empire reached its peak. For the 3rd century, I decided to switch it up a bit, and rightfully so. Even though there were great Roman emperors in the 3rd century like Aurelian, I think the best ruler on the planet during this century was Shapur I, the 2nd Sasanian emperor of Iran. He reigned for about 30 years, and he used that time very efficiently. He expanded the empire, waged a war against Romans and actually defeated them, taking their territories as far as Roman Syria. Shapur then forced Rome to sign what they called the most shameful treaty. He sacked the Roman city of Antioch in his 2nd campaign, and if that wasn't enough, he initiated another campaign, in which he captured the Roman emperor himself, Valerius. He could have easily took a good portion of Roman territory and just added to his own empire, but the only reason he didn't is that he was more interested in plundering those lands. What more needs to be said? How about the fact that the Sassanids made a 7-meter tall statue of him? Yeah, that tells you he was great. As an honorable mention, I would like to mention Emperor Wu of Jin. 4th century, we have Constantine. Yeah, this one wasn't so tough. He started off as a Western Roman emperor, but after defeating Licinius and Maximilian in the civil wars, he became the sole emperor of Rome. During his 31-year-long reign, Constantine had successfully against the tribes on the Roman frontiers, such as the Alemanni, the Goths, and the Sarmatians. He also built a new imperial residence in Constantinople, a city he named by himself. I would say that only Augustus was a better emperor than this guy. I would also like to include a very honorable mention in Samudragupta, who ruled brilliantly over the Indian Gupta Empire, winning an unprecedented number of battles. Also shout out Emperor Nintoku of Japan, who possibly reigned for 86 years, and also Tiridates III of Armenia. Moving on to the 5th century, this one is easy as well. We have Attila the Hun. He ruled over the Hunnic Empire for 19 years. During his life, he was the most feared opponent of the Roman Empire, constantly plundering their lands. Attila successfully invaded the Eastern Roman Empire, then almost invaded Gaul, and then invaded Italy, devastating the northern Roman provinces, but was unable to just sack Rome. Before all these attacks, Attila actually negotiated a treaty with the Romans, in which Emperor Theodosius II agreed to pay 700 pounds of gold a year to the Huns, which tells you all you need to know. After claiming the Romans violated the treaty, he reached 20 miles of Constantinople with his forces. which forced Theodosius to increase the sum 2.1 thousand pounds of gold annually. The Hunnic Empire collapsed shortly after his death, which just shows you that he was that empire. But still, a man who makes 3 Roman emperors scared of his every move deserves to be on this list. Honorable mention, Yuyulu Yuchen, a Mongolian ruler of the Rouran Khaganate. For the 6th century we go back to the Roman Empire, and there waits us Justinian, possibly the greatest ruler of the Eastern Roman Empire. He reigned for 38 years. He was determined to regain Roman territory that was lost to the barbarians. And he did just that. He beat the Vandals and then gained control over the entirety of Italy after fighting the Goths for almost 20 years. Justinian also codified the old Roman law and created the Code of Justinian. Oh, and he also built Hagia Sophia. He overcame all types of diversities like plagues, rebellions, attacks, invasions, religious conflicts, you name it. We can say a lot of other great things about him, but we have to move on. Shout out Khosrow I, the leader of the Sassanid Empire, and Mukan Khagan, the leader of the Turkish Khaganate though. We are going to China for the 7th century, and this was one of the easiest decisions. Taizong, the 2nd Chinese emperor of the Tang dynasty, is one of the most accomplished Chinese emperors of all time. And that is a huge statement since China had around 260 emperors. Even before he sat on the throne, he encouraged his father to rebel against the Sui dynasty. Taizong's reign is considered the golden age of ancient China. His policies and rules set up China to prosper a century after his death. He destroyed the 2nd and 3rd biggest countries of his time, the already mentioned Eastern and Western Turkish Khaganate. It is said that he achieved greatness by enduring criticism which other emperors would find difficult to accept, whilst trying hard not to abuse his absolute power. As you can imagine, during his time, China flourished economically and militarily. Honorable mentions Songtsen Gampo, the founder of the huge Tibetan Empire, and Muawiyah I, the founder of the huge Umayyad Caliphate. When you have a nickname as cool as Hammer, you have to be on this list. For the 8th century we have Charles Martel, the ruler of the Franks. He not only reunited the entire Frankish realm, but he stopped a big Muslim raiding party at the famous Battle of Poitiers. In a way, he is looked at today as the savior of Christian Europe, so much so that one English historian said that if Charles hadn't repelled the Muslims, perhaps they would today learn the Quran at Oxford. His strengthening of the Frankish kingdom set up his son and grandson, foreshadowing, to hold an even more stronger foot on all of their territory. A very big shout out goes to Zhongzong of Tang, another Chinese emperor, and Al-Mansur, the 2nd Abbasid Caliph. As I just foreshadowed, the grandson of Charles takes the spot for the 9th century. Charlemagne is considered one of the greatest rulers of all time by modern historians, so it makes sense that he is on this list. You might ask why, and for starters, he was the first Holy Roman Emperor, and that title actually meant something back then. He united the majority of Western and Central Europe and created a true superpower in Europe. Charlemagne conquered the Lombard Kingdom, southern Italy, Pyrenees, Bavaria, and much more. For all these reasons, he's nicknamed the Father of Europe. The rulers that can possibly replace him on this list are Boris I of Bulgaria, Jayavarman II, the founder of the Khmer Empire, and Yaqub ibn al-Layth al-Safar, a coppersmith who became the founder of the Safavid dynasty. Now I think the 10th century is really debatable, but I'm giving it to Nasser II. It was really close between him and Sviatoslav the Brave, but I chose Nasser for a couple of reasons. First, he ruled 2 years longer than Sviatoslav. Second, even though Sviatoslav had a little bit more success in his military campaigns, the territory that he gained wasn't the peak of his country, while for Nasser it was. Also an important point, both ended their rule with death, but while Nasser's death was of natural cause, Sviatoslav was killed in an ambush that he was warned about. So Nasser II was the head of the Samanid Empire, and he managed to bring new territory to his empire even though there were countless uprisings that was bothering his reign. It was a period of stability and prosperity for the Samanids that was never again seen. As for others, Basil II was an amazing ruler, but just on a lesser scale than these two in my opinion. Same goes for Edward the Elder, also Taizong of Song gets a shout out. I gotta go with Yaroslav the Wise for the 11th century. 35 years of rule expanded the Kievan Rus to its greatest despite many dangers he faced. His half-brother got him out of Kiev once, but he came back to crush him and rule once again. Yaroslav's army nearly conquered Constantinople after beating the Byzantine fleet, but then a storm wrecked them, and they came back empty-handed. He also destroyed the Pechenegs, who as I already mentioned killed Sviatoslav, and they were never a threat again. He also produced a code that was the main source for all Rus law. It really does get better than Yaroslav when it comes to Slav ruling. I could easily put Mahmud al-Ghazni, Tughul, or even not so easily Malik Shah, Yusuf, and Renzo Song. Yeah, this was probably the toughest choice so far. The 12th century had some heavy hitters like Frederick Barbarossa, Shizong of Jin, Aziz, Saladin, but I'm going with Muhammad and his brother Giyad. I guess you could say that I'm cheating for putting two rulers, but they're brothers, and they ruled together, so I don't care. They were sons of the Ghuri dynasty. Giyad started at 1163, and Muhammad started at 1173, and they ruled the whole remainder of the century. Giyad actually installed his bro on the throne of a city that he conquered. So if you want to pick a better one, pick Giyad. Now here comes the main reason they took the spot. They ended the huge Ghaznavid Empire by conquering its capital and killing its ruler. Then they beat the Khwarezmian Empire and took some of their territory. And after that, they had two of their biggest cities invaded by two of their biggest enemies and still repelled them. Unbelievable. I know you have likely never heard of these guys or some of my other picks in this video, but you really need to look into them, especially these guys. Also, I want to mention the first king of Portugal, Afonso I, as an honorable mention. The 13th century is finally an easy one. Was there ever any doubt? Genghis Khan himself, ladies and gentlemen. If you love history, you already know who this man is and his biggest accomplishments. But let's run over a couple of them really quick. Create the largest contiguous empire ever? Check. Destroy all of China? Check. Destroy Khwarezmia? Check. Easing trade between Europe and Asia? Check. Controlling over a quarter of the entire world population? Check. Let's just move on. I could talk all day about this man and it still wouldn't be enough. Oh, and also, Kublai Khan could have also made this list, but if it wasn't for Genghis, the guy that enabled him to do this thing in the first for the 14th century, we'll do something different. I will present you the case for both of these rulers, both Timur and Hongwu, and you'll make up your mind along the way, and I'll reveal mine at the end of this. They both ruled for 30 years. Both of them did not inherit the throne, as they both took it with their own hands and determination. While Timur was the son of a somewhat wealthy man, Hongwu was a poor peasant, whose entire family, except for his brother, died of famine when he was 16. Timur created his own empire from scratch by just conquering large parts of lands and then whole countries, as he subsequently named the empire by himself. Hongwu, on the other hand, managed to reunite all of China under his rule after it was ruled by Mongolians for 100 plus years. While Hongwu fought Mongolians and other Chinese aspirants to the throne for every region of China, he didn't conquer as much new land for his empire, but his empire lasted far more. And also, these guys were contemporaries and didn't like each other. Timur actually started an invasion of China, but died of illness before he could ever reach the Chinese lands. If he lived, this question would probably be easy to answer. Based off of all of this, who do you pick? For me, it's extremely tough, but Hongwu just edges it for me. Also honorable mention to Ozbek, the best Golden Horde leader, and Casimir III of Poland. If Timur did not make it to the top of the 14th century, his son makes it for the 15th. That's right, Shahrukh defeats some insane competition to end this, like Ahmed III and Mehmed the Conqueror. Shahrukh ruled longer than both of them, and at a greater scale. And even though Mehmed and possibly even Ivan conquered more, Shahrukh still emerges as a better leader to me. Didn't need any new lands. He already rebuilt the Timurid Empire, only missing its western provinces. He was a great diplomat who successfully repaired much of the damage caused by his father. Shahrukh took control of the main trade routes between Europe and Asia, including the infamous Silk Route, which made the empire and him incredibly rich. He had his fair share of conquest as well, but he understood that it's better to focus on the stability of his current lands, which he did very successfully. He ruled 42 years, and when he was 70, he marched himself to shut down a revolt caused by his grandson. If that doesn't scream great ruler, I don't know what does. Oh, and shout out to Vladislav II with their receding hairline, Pachacuti, the first Incan emperor, the Catholic monarch, and Sunni Ali, creator of the biggest African empire ever. Now I'm not going to add that it's unanimous, but I think most of us can agree that Suleiman dominated the 16th century like no other. I mean, the Great is a pretty common nickname for rulers, but the Magnificent is extremely rare. The man ruled for 46 years, continuously expanding his empire that went on to reach over 25 million residents. It was Ottoman Empire's military, economic, and political peak. Suleiman conquered Hungary, most of the Middle East, North Africa, as far west as Algeria, and much more. He set such a high standard that anything after him was simply not enough for the Ottoman Empire. Truly one of the greatest rulers in the Middle Ages. Let's just move on because we could talk about his accomplishments all day. His competition for this video were Elizabeth I, Charles I of Spain, his successor Philip II, and Huayna Capac. This century was pretty stacked. Now, I thought that Emperor Kangxi was a lot for the 17th century, but after I started digging into it, I changed my mind. He was one of the greatest emperors of China for sure, but there are some things that took him off the list for me. Mainly the fact that his rule is said to be 39 years long in this century, but he had one or more regions for the first 8 years of his rule. If it wasn't for that, he would probably take the spot. Louis XIV is some of you guys probably expected for the spot as well. I mean, he ruled for 57 years, and even though him and my pick are neck and neck, I'm still going with my gut. Aurangzeb was a Mughal emperor of India that ruled for 42 years and expanded the Mughal empire to its greatest extent, spanning over 4 million kilometers over almost the entirety of South Asia, as his empire reached over 150 million people. The Mughals passed up Qing China as the world's largest economy and its biggest manufacturing power under Aurangzeb. His reign also saw rapid military expansion, with several dynasties and states being overthrown during his rule. Honorable mention, Michael I of Russia. It really pains me not to put Peter the Great for the 18th century, but I have to put Emperor Qianlong. He ruled for 61 years compared to Peter's 25 in this century. Even though they are kind of in the same level as rulers, that gap is just too big to ignore. The Qing Empire under Qianlong's rule reached its most prosperous era. He destroyed several Central Asian kingdoms en route to pushing the empire to its greatest extent. I mean, you know you're a great military general when a series of your campaigns are called the 10 Great Campaigns. He probably handled the most uprisings and rebellions out of all Chinese emperors. The empire's lands nearly doubled throughout his reign, and it was already one of the biggest empires in the world. Qianlong could actually be considered the longest reigning Chinese emperor, since he actually ruled for 64 years, but formally stepped down in his 61st year so that he doesn't usurp his grandpa as the longest reigning emperor. Both Charles III of Spain and Catherine the Great get a huge honorable mention as well. Now the 19th century is tricky because you can go so many ways. If you want to go with somebody that personally expanded their territory thanks to their incredible military prowess, you can go with Napoleon. Even though I feel like we can all agree he's a better general than a ruler. If you want to go with someone that just screams longevity, stability, prosperity, and dominance over an entire century, you can go with Queen Victoria. And that's exactly where I went. Sorry Napoleon, but ruling exceptionally well for almost 64 years is just something else. I mean, that whole period is called the Victorian era, so I had to give her the spot. The period was marked with huge expansion of the empire. She is also credited with making the monarchy popular again in the United Kingdom. Victoria was the first English emperor of India. She was also the first monarch in the world to ride a train. Besides Napoleon, I would like to give Emperor Pedro II his flowers for rebuilding Brazil into a strong country, and Alexander II of Russia, the last good Russian Tsar. Now I have to be really careful for the 20th century because, as you all know, it's the century of ideologies and almost every single big leader representing a certain ideology. So I didn't want to pick somebody and immediately be looked at as someone who supports what they did and what they stood for. With that being said, it is very hard being objective with this pick. So let me just go with the safe one. Mustafa Kemal, nicknamed Ataturk, was the leader of Turkey from 1923 to 1938. Whether you agree with him westernizing his nation and other accomplishments of his or not, the fact of the matter is, he did exactly what he set out to do for his country, which is just the definition of capability. He rose to prominence by literally being the best World War I general in the world, and that's almost undisputed at this point. Also, he undertook great reforms in order to industrialize and modernize the nation, and he did just that. Turkey became one of the strongest countries in Europe. Honorable mentions would be, let's say, Churchill, Gandhi, Subhuza II, who ruled for 82 years, and Selassie maybe. There you go, my list is complete, and I can finally rest assured that I made one that I'm happy with. You guys might not agree with some or most of them, which is fine, but be sure to let me know in the comments. Also, I probably forgot about some pretty obvious, but hey, I'm only human. But yeah guys, that's it. Make sure to subscribe to continue watching videos like this.